Welcome to Renewing African Mindset discussion program. Today's topic is on tackling sexual abuse of minors. Recently, it's been trending all over social media with terrible incidents of minors being sexually abused, not only by strangers, but by people closely related to them, especially their relatives. Renewing African Mindset is actually a discussion program which creates a platform where we discuss topical issues which are usually not discussed in the open due to cultural beliefs, traditional values, and most especially because of the stigma attached to some issues. What's your mindset? Your mindset is actually born out of your family background, your exposure in life, your experiences, associations with people, traditional values, and cultural beliefs. The aim of RAM is to positively influence the way we think and appreciation of fundamental factors which affect the mindset. Also, a reorientation for positive achievement. There's some taboos in Africa, but we want to destigmatize some taboos because in this present day and age, there's some certain incidents that happen and people keep quiet about whatever they are facing, which ultimately affects their well-being, which could lead to depression or worse, suicide. Today is on tackling sexual abuse of minors. These are the voiceless people. They are vulnerable. And we need to start speaking out and talking loud and clear that it is no longer acceptable. In the past, people will keep quiet and say, well, people have been doing it for centuries. There is no big deal. It is a big deal because in a way, lives are being destroyed. Some people grow up into adulthood and begin to repeat the same thing they went through when they were much younger. So today, we have the panel. 4 of them are barristers, and we also have a psychotherapist. We want to talk about the issue. What about the challenges being faced when incidents like this are reported to the police? What about the court system? We want to talk about that. And we want to proffer solutions as to how to help the victims or survivors of this terrible crime. And we also want to talk a bit about the perpetrators. What goes on inside the mind of an abuser? Why would an adult be attracted to a young person? We shouldn't forget, it's not just the girls that are sexually abused. Boys are also sexually abused, but we tend to hear a lot about men sexually abusing young girls. The opposite also happens, and people keep quiet about it. So today, we are going to address this issue and see whether by creating this awareness, things will begin to change. And we begin to change the narrative and help save lives. So the first person we have to tell us what sexual abuse is about, especially when it relates to a minor, is David Owusu Yanoma. David is of a Ghanaian descent, is a barrister at 12 Old Square Lincoln's Inn in London, England. Called to the bar 30 years ago by the Honorable Society of the Inner Temple, he has held very high-profile legal positions with various establishments, including Council of the Inns of Courts, disciplinary tribunals. He was called to the bar in Ghana about 15 years ago. He has appeared in a number of high-profile and sensitive cases of murder, rape, child cruelty, child sex abuse, to mention a few. He's very passionate about fairness, and the efficient, speedy delivery of justice. Welcome, David, to Renewing African Mindset.
Thank you very much for this kind invitation and for all the good work that you're doing.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask you some questions. We go back to the basics as we do on any RAM program. What's sexual abuse?
Sexual abuse is a crime where a person's sexuality is effectively interfered with. It can take a number of different forms. As far as today's topic is concerned, sexual abuse against minors, that is the youngest, most vulnerable members of our society, it's a very serious matter indeed. But as I say, sexual abuse is a crime.
Okay.
It has to be taken very seriously.
Yeah, you're based in the UK, you practice in the UK here. What's the imprisonment term for an offense like this if found guilty?
Well, there are a number of different offenses which come under this general umbrella of sexual assault. I mean, for example, rape comes under this general umbrella of sexual assault. And for an offense of rape, especially rape of a child, a person can go to prison for life. So there's a wide range of offenses determined by the seriousness of the offending, whether the person committing the offense is a repeat offender, and various other circumstances which a court takes into consideration. But generally speaking, sentences of imprisonment are imposed for offenses of rape and other sexual offenses involving children.
Okay. You know, I've seen it somewhere where several times, actually, I'm sure all of us have read it in the papers, where a child will come out and say they've been sexually abused, and that was probably about 20 years ago. We know we deal with historical cases here in the UK. Is there any statute of limitation in offenses relating to sexual abuse of minors?
No, there isn't.
In the UK?
No, there isn't. There isn't any statute of limitation. And in fact, in recent times, there have been historic cases, where people who were assaulted as children come out as adults to complain about what happens to them. And so you have people who may have committed an offense 20, 30 years ago, who find themselves appearing in front of a court for historic sex abuse offenses.
Right. Is there any sex offenders register in the UK here? And how long can the name be retained on that register?
There is a sex offenders register, and the purpose of the sex offenders register is effectively to protect the public and to enable the authorities keep track of where offenders who may have completed their sentence and have been released into the public are now living, so as to provide some degree of safety if, for example, a convicted and sentenced pedophile serves a prison in that part of the country. A register is signed on in their new location so that the police know where they are.
Right. And that's in the UK?
Yes, yes.
Say, for example, somebody committed such crime in another country. How will they know in the UK that the person's committed such a crime?
I suppose it depends on the situation of the country. If, for example, that other country requires that you notify the authorities if you're leaving the country, then there may be a sharing of information between the police. But if the country that a convict or offender is coming from doesn't keep such records, then there's no way in which the police in the UK are going to know about it.
Okay. I'll just ask this question. We're still going to come back to it. There was a case trending probably last week, which involved a pastor, and he was alleged to have raped his own daughter. I know you're a lay preacher. Say in that kind of situation, you are quite aware. How would this situation be addressed, do you think?
At what stage do you have in mind?
Well, the thing is, what we read in the papers was that this was a preacher as well, because, you know, in Africa, as we know, it would appear that there is a rule of law, but it's not necessarily obeyed when you compare with developed nations, Western countries, you know. So if that be the case, we have a lot of issues where things are brushed under the carpet and people begin to pray, hoping that the whole matter will die down. So do you think the church also has a role to play in all of this?
Most certainly. Let me put it this way. I'm going to give a rather long answer, and forgive me in advance.
Okay.
This issue of child sexual abuse,
Right,
is, put it this way, by the time an allegation of child sexual abuse gets to the police or
yes,
to lawyers, it's probably a bit late, in the sense that the offense has already been. What we need to understand about this offense is that it is an offense. It's not only a crime against the individual, it's a crime against humanity. It's a crime against society. And ultimately, I would say it's a crime against God. Now, in the particular context of today's discussion, it is a crime against the most vulnerable members of our society. It is a crime which is often committed to satisfy the perpetrator's lust. It leaves the victim feeling hurt, frightened, and scarred. In some instances, both mentally and physically. As I say, it's a crime against the most vulnerable, voiceless members of our society. Infants and young children are targeted. It is a repugnant and repulsive form of behavior. It's disgusting and it's offensive. And it corrupts the lives of other people. It corrupts their innocence. It's nasty. And I think we need to see that as being the bedrock of this type of offending. Sexuality is a part of our humanity. Now, going back to your question about a pastor who has defiled his daughter. What the Bible has to say about children. And let me just say three things. Number one, this pastor will understand that the Bible teaches that children are a heritage from the Lord, and that the fruit of the womb is a reward, firstly. Secondly, that we are to train our children in the way that they should go, and that when they are old, they will not depart from it. And thirdly, there's a verse which came to my mind about Jesus saying something about whoever causes one of these little ones to stumble or to sin, it would be better if a millstone were tied around their neck and they were drowned in the depth of the sea. So, as I say, the pastor will probably be more aware of what the Bible has to say about this issue than I am. But just taking those three passages of the scripture, it's quite clear that we have a duty of care and responsibility to look after these most vulnerable members of our society. And if we are going to be abusing or interfering with them in this way, then there are serious sanctions which will be brought to bear. And yeah.
Thank you so much for that. There's this expression, the African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child, which obviously means that, people around that particular child are there to provide a safe and healthy environment where they can nurture them, and also to provide security for them to develop and flourish, to ensure that their hopes and dreams are met. But if we keep on destroying, when I say we, I'm using a collective word here, we're not perpetrators, but I'm saying that, some people, if they now decide that it's that type of child they want to destroy, then are we really acting the way we should as adults, as parents? And you also mentioned something, a duty of care. When you are in position of trust and you begin to abuse a child, I think that is the most despicable act one could ever commit, whether it's your child or not. We're going to discuss that later, as we normally do on RAM, Renewing African Mindset. We cover diverse perspectives. You've just given us a bit of legal as well as the religious side. Now, let's swing back again to the legal aspect. The next person that's going to speak is Kevin. Kevin Metgar is actually a barrister and deputy head at Great James Street Chambers, which is based in London, England. He has interest in international human rights law and civil liberties. His practice spanning 36 years comprises serious crime, private international law, human rights law, matrimonial and general common law. He has appeared as lead counsel in numerous serious criminal cases, trials involving juveniles and adult defendants, complex civil matters, immigration, human rights violations, matrimonial and child custody. He's been involved in several high-profile criminal cases in the United Kingdom here. He was called to the bar in Sierra Leone in 1986 and became an associate leading set of chambers in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Anfemi, and thank you, Ram, for inviting us onto this very, very serious discussion about a matter that is of great concern, I think, worldwide. You've also pointed out to me that I need to check my profile because I've now been at the bar for 38 years, not 36, although 36.
Practice 36 years. Practice 36 years. Anyway, let's quickly go on into these questions here. Is there a difference? I'm not sure. How is it in Sierra Leone? Is it different from the UK? I mean, you practice in the UK as well. How do they manage sexual abuse cases?
Well, let me start by saying, first of all, I think that the intentions of the lawmakers are sincere.
Right.
Let me start by saying I think the intentions of the NGOs and the political parties, all the people involved in pushing for changes in the law are sincere.
Right.
Because we've had some changes in the law in recent times. The Sexual Offences Act in Sierra Leone came about in 2012. It's all encompassing. It deals with all the sorts of things we're talking about, including assaults on minors, various forms of the offense, whether it be to a boy child or a girl child, and so on and so forth. Then in 2019, there was an amendment which for the first time brought into the Sierra Leonean space the idea of a database of offenders, the idea of recording people who have committed sexual offenses for the very reasons that you talked about with David earlier. However, and with the best will in the world, even on the side of the police and so on and so forth, Sierra Leone happens to be very underfunded when it comes to the question of investigation of offences. And I think that this particular type of offence is no different to others. And it's incumbent on those of us who work in this area to try and raise the profile of this, to try and make sure that more is done, to make sure it's nipped in the bud, because too many lives, as David mentioned, are affected by this. The child who is interfered with, the rest of the family, that child's siblings, the mother or the father, let's say the other person involved. What about the village, the rest of the village who've taken the responsibility of raising that child? They must surely feel some form of responsibility, wish they'd known earlier, or want to find a way in which we can avoid this sort of thing happening. And I want to end by saying one thing. A lot of things have been said about the First Lady in Sierra Leone, that she is outspoken and so on and so forth. But one of the things she seems to have held closest to her heart is to support those young children, particularly girls, who have been affected by sexual abuse. And I think that to a certain extent is very commendable.
Thank you. Is sexual abuse a bailable offense? Because at times there is, an alleged perpetrator is left still roaming around the streets.
Well, technically all offenses, with the exception of murder and treason, I think in Sierra Leone, are bailable offenses. And even those, you can go to the High Court and apply for bail. So it is really a matter of both sides being weighed. We mustn't forget, even though these are despicable offenses, there are sometimes circumstances in which allegations are made whereby the perpetrator is misidentified. For example, let's say it's something that happened 30 years ago. Memories may become blurred. And everybody would say if something like that happened to you, you would never forget. But there might be more than one person who was in the vicinity at the time that occurred. And then when the allegation is made, maybe one of those persons is no longer living. Maybe one of those persons can't be found. And with the pressure that comes with making such an allegation and seeing it through, it's often the case that somebody has to be arrested, somebody has to be charged once the offense has been made out. And we must be careful to understand that there are always two sides to a story. So the fact that somebody is alleged to have committed an offense doesn't mean they have committed the offense. And that's why there are things such as bail to allow everybody who comes to the court to believe and understand that the court is fair and no final decision is made until the evidence has been gone through and tested.
I want to pick on 2 points there. I see on social media when an allegation has been made, the person hasn't been tried in court. The next thing, you see the name flying all over the place. Would you say that's acceptable?
From a legal perspective, definitely not. From a human perspective, it is understandable. But those people who jump to, as it were, pass that sort of information on social media must understand that that in itself is a crime. In Sierra Leone, I think it was last year, they passed a anti-cyber crimes bill, which makes things like that an offense, quite apart from the offenses of libel and defamation, because somebody may be passing on information, may get information wrong, may name the wrong person, and there is significant stigma attached to this sort of thing. So being tried in the court of public opinion may have its own ramifications, but realistically, the courts are there to protect the rights of all parties, the guilty, the innocent, the victim, the survivor. And what we need to do is to make sure that the courts can do their jobs properly, the lawyers, the law enforcement agencies, so that the right person is convicted, the right offenses are made out, and people can be sentenced according to the law.
Okay. You also mentioned something to do with, divulging information. I'm paraphrasing now. We've heard of sexual abuse cases where later on, it's discovered that the mother actually knew about it all along, that the husband or the father, or should I say the husband, and also who happens to be the father of the victim, has been doing that, abusing the child for a very, very long time. Where does the law stand in this? Would you prosecute the two parents or just the alleged abuser, maybe the father in this instance?
Well, of course, it's a hypothetical situation. As David said when he was answering one of your questions, it can sometimes be difficult to answer hypothetical questions without answering them at some length.
Yeah.
I will try to keep this very short.
Yeah.
The law allows for people who have acted together in criminality to be charged with those offenses. And if those charges are made out, they are convicted, they will be sentenced. So the fact that somebody is married, let's take it on a spousal basis, a woman married to a man who has committed this offense, or the other way around, but was aware of it and turned a blind eye to it. What the law will be looking at is, were they just turning a blind eye, or were they actively involved? Did they encourage it? Now, active encouragement makes it an offense in their own right. Turning a blind eye will then need to examine that much more carefully. At what stage was the blind eye turned? Was it when it was reported? And at that time, the person, the spouse was thinking, well, oh my God, if this goes out into the public, I'm going to lose my husband, or I'm going to lose my wife. Everybody's going to know about it. There's shame. There's so many factors playing on it. Now, let's stop and think, because whatever the circumstances here, the person who was affected and badly treated was the child. That child now stands a chance of both parents being prosecuted and both parents being sent to jail, whereas one party maybe didn't actively support her and one actively committed the damage. And you see, the child suffers then twice, because the other party could be there to support her, depending, as I say, on the stage at which that other spouse became aware and how they acted. But there's one thing that runs as a common thread through UK law and all past colonies, because the British left this law with us, and that is to say, a wife or a husband, on the other hand, cannot be compelled to give evidence against his or her spouse. They may if they wish, but they cannot be compelled. So that also needs to be added into the mix, because the fact that you cannot compel someone doesn't mean that that person has committed an offense. They are remaining within their right in not coming to give evidence. The rest, I think, is a psychological matter for somebody who is perhaps more learned in the area of how the mind works and what the effects are on the parties involved.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin, for enlightening us on these issues. I mean, there's some gray areas as well. So, and then depending on the contrary, because you're based in the UK, but I think I'm sure we'll talk about Nigeria as well, but from what you've said to me, I think Sierra Leone is actually a step, ahead of Nigeria. We're going to hear from the people in Nigeria soon. The next person that's going to shed some light on how they handle cases of sexual abuse of minors in Nigeria at this time is Tola Rotimi. Tola is actually a barrister of Nigerian descent. She actually schooled in England here, did a law degree in England here, called to the bar in 1989, and she's been a lawyer for over 33 years. She joined the Lagos State Ministry of Justice as a counsel about 30 years ago, and has since held various positions, including assistant director at the Directorate of Public Prosecutions and assistant director of the Directorate of Citizens' Rights. She's also worked as the head of unit at Human Rights Department. Now, this bit here, I really want to highlight it because of the kind of questions I'm going to ask her later on. She's certified in crime scene investigation, crime scene processing, forensic toxicology, forensic photography, fingerprinting, and DNA profiling. She helped to design the sexual assault rape kits currently used at primary health centers across Lagos State. Lagos State is actually one of 36 states in Nigeria to collect samples from victims of sexual assaults. She's actually a member of the Domestic and Sexual Violence Team of Lagos State, popularly known as DSVRT. She has been involved in very high-profile cases involving domestic violence and child sex abuse cases. She is currently the Administrator General and Public Trustee of Lagos State in the Ministry of Justice. Welcome, Tola. Can you unmute yourself, Tola?
Oh, sorry.
Welcome. Now.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes. You're a member of the Domestic Violence and Sexual Response Team. How effective is this agency?
Well, I would say that, yes, the agency is effective, and I'll tell you the reasons why. Ever since Lagos State government, I'm going to talk from the point of Lagos State now, because that's where I work. Ever since the team was constituted in 2015, we have recorded a high percentage of prosecutions. Yes, I don't have the figure right now on my fingernails. And then also there have been so many reforms and innovations through the Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency. We now have a legally constituted agency now, and a lot of things has happened. For instance, now, I would say that during the time that the agency was established, or the team was established in 2015, I'll start with the law, that there had been a lot of reforms in the law. For instance, the Child Rights Law of Lagos State, which was established in 2007, and then, amended in 2015, as we have it now. There have been lots of reforms where stakeholders has actually looked into the law, looked at where there are loopholes, and how we can actually safeguard and protect the children in Lagos State. That's one. And of course, during that time as well is the establishment of the domestic violence law, which now is inclusive of everybody living under your roof, whether you are male or female, including your gardener, your housemaid, everybody that lives within your household. So you're protected by that law as well. So, and then of course, during this time as well, when this agency was formed, that was when the family court was actually established in Lagos State. So the family court basically deals with cases of families, domestic violence, all form of crimes, and sexual assault, and of course, matrimonial matters as well. So the courts quickly, because of that, the court is able to quickly dispense with a lot of cases. There was actually a judge that it went viral that within 2 months, she actually handed judgments in about 21 cases within 2 months. So with the establishment of that agency, a lot of things have been happening. Just like Kevin said, also within this time when this agency was created, we now in Lagos State have the offenders register, sex offenders register as well. We have what we call victim support as well, where because we find out that even when some victims do come to court, they cannot afford the transportation. It could be that maybe they are from very humble background and they will need assistance. And of course, the protection unit as well is there in place where somebody has to come and give evidence, or probably it could be the member of the family, maybe the mother that has been sent out of the house and has to be put in protective custody. It could even be the child that we're talking about that needs to be removed from that environment and actually put in protective custody as well. And of course, the agency, like I said, does a lot of awareness. So people are speaking out, women are speaking out, even children are speaking out. And then one laudable thing that we did recently now is that in all public schools in Lagos State, we now have groups that we call Queens and Kings. That is in schools. Now we go, I'm a member, I'm a mentor. You choose a school to be a mentee, to be your mentee. And there are certain girls in the school that are in that group, which are called Queens. And then of course we have the male one, which are the Kings. So we teach them about domestic violence, the rights of children, rights of a child and things like that. And then you find out that these children, they actually know a lot. So they come out, they tell you, they even tell you about stories of their friends. And of course, the team will take it in confidence, will take it up, and then, we will have the case investigated. If it is true, then, the appropriate authorities will work on it. Also, we have what we call the mandatory reporting in Lagos State. That is, if you are a civil servant, whether you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you work within the service, and then even you're a parent, you're a teacher, you work with children, and then any case is reported to you, or you happen to witness a case, you must report to the appropriate authorities. Failure to do so might lead to 2 years imprisonment and disciplinary action if you're a civil servant. So there are quite a lot of number of things and reforms and innovations in Lagos State to safeguard children in Lagos State. We also have, I can just show you little things like this, you see, safeguarding children. We have little literatures like this.
Yeah.
You can see.
Yeah. Can I just quickly stop you there? That's part of the solutions we're going to talk about later on, and how you've been providing training to judges and people within the judiciary. It's actually a laudable initiative. I must commend Lagos State for that, because the last time when we had a representative from Lagos State, or should I say a couple of representatives, things were being discussed, but not in detail as this, and how you've actually moved on from where you were. So kudos to Lagos State. The thing is this replicated in other states?
Well, yes, some states are actually replicating it. And I would say most of the states that have replicated are from the Western states, like Ogun has, Ekiti, Ondo, because I'm even one of the people that had assisted in replicating these things. And then, of course, Edo State, some cases in the South.
Yes, in the South. It's quite understandable, because there is also the issue of, child bride in the northern part of Nigeria. So it makes it a little bit more difficult, which we touched on the last time when we're talking about tackling sexual abuse of minors, part 1. Thank you so much for the contribution on that level. But there have been allegations as well of selective justice and prosecutions, especially to do with high-profile figures. How true is that?
You see, for me, you
I know this
cannot.
happens across the board, especially in Africa, but
Yes.
especially within Lagos State.
Yeah, you see, it cannot be proven. People, it's just speculation. People do a lot of speculation. And one thing that I always tell people is that, look, if your case is airtight, investigation is airtight, no courts will throw out the case. But you see, when the case is not properly investigated, when even the so-called witnesses are changing their stories, and then you begin to have loopholes. Of course, the court cannot manufacture evidence. The court will throw out the case for want of diligent prosecution at the end of the day. So that's why I always advise people that, look, once you know that you are going to go ahead with this case, make sure that it is airtight, the case is properly investigated by the police, and then also that the fact that all evidence are intact. At times, you see, when you are trying to prove a case of a child, the law says that the evidence of the child must be corroborated. That's what the Evidence Act says. So it is either corroborated by an adult or scientific evidence. Don't forget that when these crimes are being perpetrated, there will be nobody there, except maybe there is a CCTV. So the only way you can do it now is through scientific means, maybe DNA and all other kind of scientific evidence. So, but then how far do we investigate to make sure it's airtight? Chain of custody. There's one thing you call in forensics and criminal law, chain of custody of the case. Who handled it? Has the evidence been tampered with? And things like that. So these are things that we have to ensure that we close the gap so that there is no perforation where things will be slipping through and then the case will be thrown out of court, or where the witnesses fails to come to court. There's nothing the court can do at the end of the day. So these are the areas that we really have to plug for me. So that these speculations, you see, that's why I am saying that speculations most of the time. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but then most of the time it cannot be proven, unfortunately.
Can I ask, is there any rule of law in Nigeria?
What, pertaining to
sexual abuse of minors,
Certainly, there are plethora of laws in Nigeria, starting from the Constitution, the African Charter, the Child Rights Law, the Child Rights Act, the Domestic Violence Law, even CEDAW. We have lots and lots of cases that laws that actually, are in place that people can actually tap into and, use appropriately. And another thing again is that at times when the prosecution, when I'm talking of the prosecution, it could be the police, it could be the counsel, when they profile a charge in court, when you do it under the wrong section of the law, then you begin to give, the other party, an advantage over you. So these are areas that even we as lawyers, we have a duty as well.
So is the rule of law obeyed in Nigeria?
Certainly, because people do go to prison. When it comes to child rights law, once you're convicted, the person goes to prison until maybe the case is overturned at a higher court. And I've not seen one that had been overturned, not in Lagos State. Yes, they go to the appeal, but it has not been overturned.
Okay. How are cases dealt with, especially when it involves high-profile individual? Nigeria is a place where status is very important, just like the rest of Africa. The spotlight is just in Nigeria today.
As far as I'm concerned, the law is no respecter of anybody. Whether you are high or low, the law deals with everybody accordingly. That's why I said, you see, when we are trying to bring up a charge, we must make sure that it's airtight, that yes, a reasonable court of law, will find some sense in it. If not, under no case submission, the case will be thrown out if you don't have sufficient evidence. And then people will start reading that, because he's rich, that's why he was left off the hook. But there must have been some loopholes here and there that had caused it. So the law is no respecter of anybody, whether rich or poor.
Okay. Another question, or should I say one that I just want to quickly ask you here is, recently there have been a high rate of incidents involving sexual abuse of minors. Why do you think this is the case?
Well, there are lots of things that causes it. Number one is, I'll start with the parents. There is a high risk of reporting of child neglect on behalf of parents. I have seen it personally as well, where especially mothers are not careful enough. They don't take care of their children the way they are supposed to, you know. So there's negligence. And then at times that negligence could be as a result of poverty. Because just last night, I was coming back from an outing and I saw children, you know, about 10-year-old, 11, 8-year-old hawking groundnut on the streets. Why would the parent at that time leave the child to hawk on the street? But then when you ask the parents, the thing, what they will say is that they're looking for money to take care of the children. You see, so parents have a lot of role to play in, you know, child negligence. So there's a lot of child negligence. Like I said, poverty as well. And then also the fact that, yes, the perpetrator might be the person sponsoring the child's education, or maybe sponsoring even the feeding in the home, and he has an upper hand. So what does the parent do? Oh, because we are poor, let's keep quiet. And then they continue to tell the child to endure. Then culture says a lot.
Yeah, so these are the causes, yes. But then again, it's still not an excuse to abuse.
It is not an excuse, I agree with you. But those are, you know, when you go out to investigate what are the causes of this thing, this is what we get, you know. Yeah, and then also the fact that, you know, like I said, part of our culture in Africa, we don't see pedophiles as pedophiles.
True.
We don't see them as pedophiles. Somebody does it, you know, you see a 14-year-old messing up with a 12-year-old, you begin to caution and have that child to have a kind of psychosocial support. But then they leave the child and then the child grows up to become a full-blown pedophile. But in Africa, we don't see it as pedophile.
Yeah, that's true. Because, I mean, there have been cases, I mean, when I put this out, a lot of people were saying, oh, it's been happening for centuries. Why are you now talking about it? I said, because it's been happening for centuries doesn't mean that it's acceptable. It's totally unacceptable. Sexual child abuse or abuse of any child of any kind, it's totally wrong. But this one is just that, you know, you talked about poverty, but we've seen some cases whereby we are talking about people, the high and mighty within the society, professionals. What would they be doing with a child? Surely that person probably has a problem, definitely a deep-rooted problem.
Certainly.
And that's why we're going to talk to our next guest. We want to find out the impact of such crime on a minor and also the profile of such abuser. What's wrong with such an individual, especially when the person is a professional, when the person has a duty of care? Why will somebody like that risk everything and start messing around with a child when they know that they could end up in prison? In fact, some people will just see the prison as the end of their lives, and the unfortunate could happen, worse than imprisonment. The next person who's going to share with us on the psychological effects of this heinous crime is terrible crime, despicable crime, is Mary Bather-Okon. She's a multicultural, independent psychological therapist with extensive years of experience working with children, adolescents, adults, and families who have experienced trauma, autism, various mental health diagnoses, and psychological well-being concerns. She's a psychology graduate, obviously, with MSc in psychological therapies, and she's got wide variety of clinical and private practical experience. She's a trained spiritual counselor with over 15 years of experience working with individuals from various ethnic, economic backgrounds who wish to understand their life purpose and find themselves. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Which one do you want me to answer first?
Okay, let me just ask, what do you see as the profile of an alleged perpetrator, first of all? Or a perpetrator, whether convicted or whether pending investigation?
Yeah.
What goes on through the mind of such an individual?
Okay, a pedophile or pedophilia is a general psychiatric disorder, like many other psychiatric disorders. So you can't necessarily see an individual walking about and say, oh, he looks like a pedophile or she looks like a pedophile. Please don't forget, women equally can be pedophiles as well, not just men.
Sure.
So you can't necessarily say that this individual walking around is a pedophilia. Another sad part is this individual might not even know themselves that they have these tendencies until they find themselves in a situation where they have these urges, desires to inflict that desire on an unassuming child or a minor. So it's a very difficult question to say the profile, because if the individual themselves don't even know they have these tendencies until found in the situation, then you can't tell. You can have an individual not married, walking around, functioning perfectly well in society. He's well respected. He gets married, has a baby. All of a sudden, you now have this person's mind going off and having desires to touch their own child, be it the mother or be the father. So these thoughts could come and they might try to suppress it and fight it. Now, for the love of his child or their children, they might not act out on these desires at home, but they might go to their brother's house, sister's house, uncle, another person's house, and see other children where the emotional connection is not that strong. So inflicting these things on other people's children is not that hurtful because it's not his own child. Another one that might be very extreme doesn't care whether it's their child or not. They will do it at home because people won't know, people won't see it. It stays at home. So you never can tell how the depth of the person's mental, illness or what they're capable of doing when these desires come up. And then, so that's that.
So
for
really, it's a form of mental illness, you would say.
It's a really well researched psychological disorder.
Right. Tola mentioned something earlier that they would have been doing. We were all kids one time, and then, we'll play, oh, I'm the father, I'm the mother, or whatever. So would you say this sort of individuals, they had been doing this probably at a very early age, and the parents or the person who's meant to be taking care of them did not recognize the unacceptable traits? Or were they just covering up? The writing must have been on the wall. And they had been getting away with it
in some cases, you might see it. In other cases, you won't see it. Now, children playing mommy, daddy, or playing with dolls does not mean there's a problem. Some children are just innocently playing a game and that's it. Now, in a situation where you now have, and let me just state, a lot of mental disorders or psychiatric disorders we have can be genetic. So not everything is learned or environmental. Some of these disorders, depression can be genetic. Schizophrenia, so lots of mental illness are passed down to your next generations. So just because a parent didn't act out on it because they were able to control it because of society, if that particular parent, for example, grew up in the UK and knows the laws are enforced, or US laws are there, they're watching, they might not act up on it because they're in a society where laws are strict. Now, this person comes to Africa or different continent or different country where laws are don't exist.
Mhm.
Boom, they're now living out on it because now I'm free. No one cared. I can do what I like because there's nothing, so children playing these games doesn't mean nothing. But if there is a genetic predisposition to all these things, then there might be something coming out or bring out you wouldn't know, unsuspecting. You as a parent think is fun. They're playing games.
Mhm.
Now that is where education comes in as a caregiver, be it a parent, be it a guardian, whoever you are. If you are a bit exposed, educated, like Motala was saying that some people are very much in Lagos, people are very educated. Kids of the Gen Zs here, they know more than we do. Now you go back a bit in our rural settings or a bit back out of society or in the cities, then you have less education. So you don't have caregivers being in tune with, oh, no, this game you're playing is not good. No, play something else. Or no, don't do that. The awareness is not there. They're not exposed, so they don't know. They just let kids do whatever they want to do. Like she was saying, kids being out on the streets at 10, 11. There is no education. There is no awareness what could happen. And I would bet with you that these parents that do allow these kids to play these games or allow them to be on the streets at certain times or with men at any time because it's not because they don't care or because sometimes they themselves have been through these things, they survived it, and don't see nothing wrong with it. It's okay, I survived it, I'll be fine. You'll be okay, that uncle touched you, I beg, be quiet. What's your problem? It was just a touch. And the child is shut up and won't say nothing again. So a lot of times, the caregiver's reaction might even allow the child not to see anything wrong in what is being done to it because the parent didn't fling an eye or didn't do anything.
We always tend to think, oh, maybe because the person came from a less privileged background. Recently, I was reading about a case. The mother was actually aware. And when the whistleblower kept on saying, no, this is wrong, the perpetrators, or should I say the alleged perpetrator's mother actually said, well, what if he did it? Do you really have to scream out to let the whole world know? So you begin to wonder, the mother must have been aware of this person's, I wouldn't say weakness, this person's dirty habits until, to adulthood. So something that should have been nipped in the bud wasn't. So would you say that such mother doesn't know how to cope with the situation, or we're just going back to the way we used to think, the village mindset? Well, after all, he's a boy. And then he now grows up and he's doing that. And you also mentioned the person knows that if they do that in the Western world where there is rule of law which must be obeyed, they wouldn't do that. But they will go to a place where there's no respect for the rule of law.
Yeah. A parent's reaction to such abuse is always internal. It's always an internal mental weighing in of, if I report, what are the consequences? If I don't, what are the consequences? What do I gain to lose if I report? How is it going to affect the family? What will people say and think? So a parent's first reaction are these things. They start weighing all these things. And then secondly, you may have a parent again, if they've been in situations like that before, survived it,
right,
and came out of it, very unlikely would they report it because it was okay with them. They survived. They will pep talk their children. They will be fine. So they won't really do much. And then you have another situation where the parent will look at the age of their child that was defiled. There's another situation where, if it's a teenager, because in most countries, I think it's 18. Now, if you have a situation where the child was maybe 14, 15, female or male, their reaction may not be the same as a child that was maybe 4 or 5. So parents will weigh all these things before they act. Now, in the Western world, where again you have laws and strict structures in place, first reaction, I'm calling 911, I'm calling the police, because they know something will happen. In a situation where it's a husband and wife, and they have one spouse abusing the child, most likely it won't go out. Both of them have really trying to protect themselves mentally and prop themselves. It won't go out. They will keep it within unless the child is older. Like we have a situation where the child, I think another one that was trending, where the father and son molested a sister, that's the father's child, a daughter, and it only came out because she got pregnant. So you ask yourself, how many years was she defiled until the pregnancy came in? If it didn't come in, this girl I don't know how old she was, her age wasn't really there. I didn't see it, but you would ask yourself, where was the mother? Was there a mother? Was there a caregiver? And why didn't it come out until she got pregnant? So families or couples, guardians won't really come out because emotionally and mentally, they'll weigh out their personal experiences, society, and laws in place before they will come out.
And I suppose, like you said before, the stigma attached to it, that, oh, this happened in our family, you know. And now let's go to the child who's been abused. What's the impact? I mean, you run this clinics. What's the impact that you see? Can you share some of the experiences of a child, children who have been abused?
In general, you want to, if the younger the children, probably the less of memory retainment there will be. So if a child is quite young, there is hope that mentally, emotionally, they might not remember because of their brain development, because of age, they will outgrow it and it will be a distant memory of something happened to them, but the emotional trauma won't carry a lot of weight as they get older. And then if it's someone a bit older, maybe 9, 10, 11, who has a good memory of consciousness, they will take that quite longer with them. What you want to do is family involvement. You cannot help defiled children unless you have the families involved to know how best what to do. You also need to look at the medical aspect of this. Did the child sustain any medical injuries? Now, if there are medical injuries that were sustained, no matter how young, how old, it means they will remember this for the rest of their lives because that injury will go with them. So a lot of aspects are involved in how to help these children, but definitely home support, family support is number one in knowing how to find coping mechanisms, how to find ways to help these kids cope and what to do. So you need to find ways. Families have to be involved in what the kids like to do, love to do, how to find how the child is coping. It comes from home. Are they having nightmares? Are they functioning well in society as a whole or in school? Are they ripping up their toys apart and being angry and doing? So you need to observe, and parents are the ones, or guardians are the ones that will give you all these feedback in terms of how much these children or babies are coping with the trauma. Are they destroying things? Are they going to school hitting people? Or are they just, it's a lot of outward behaviors that would let you know as a psychologist how they're coping with the trauma. Are they allowed to talk about it without stigma? Are they encouraged to talk about when they have questions? Why did he do it to me? Why did she do it to me? Did I do anything wrong? Was I wearing the wrong clothes? So answers to all these things and trying to make sure that they understand that the person that did that to you is the one that has a problem. You know, so all these things, making the children or the families understand that it's not about you, it's about the person that did that to you that has the problem. You need to make sure that you are okay and you understand that. If that is understood and there's no stigma to this child's upbringing and all its environment, and people don't talk about it to taunt the child or anything, then, you know, there is hope that they will be functioning, average, and normal in society.
Thank you for that. Certainly, each case is different. There was a case that I saw on Facebook recently where the girl was abused by her dad, and she said she didn't want to go back home. She knew that her education was going to be affected. All she wants is to go back to school. She doesn't want to be around them anymore. So when you now talk about bringing the whole family in, I suppose that would be a different case, bringing such a man to be around the child. And like you said before, you know, the other spouse would be protecting the father. Well, in this case, is the father that's the abuser. So it's really a case of treating the child, because it's the child that's most important, the child being abused. Like David said earlier, the voiceless, the most vulnerable within a society. We must take care of them because this is a safeguarding issue. And the police as well. How do they take witness statements? These are all the things that one needs to find out. Even though the first, the part one that we had the police officer who said, you know, they had a way of taking statements and everything else. But like Tola also said, if they're not forthcoming to give statements, they can't do anything. And that's why I think the Western nations is different, because they will provide all the resources to make the victims or survivors feel very comfortable to talk. And I mean, I'm sure when they go to court, even they don't have to see, they are behind the screen. Both Kevin and David would actually agree with me on this. So we still have a long way to go in Africa, to be quite honest. So the next person we're going to talk to here has an NGO. He's going to shed more light on how he's been able to make his own contributions as a child advocate. And I always like it when men are involved in things like this. When we had the FGM movement so many years ago, it was just women, and people probably thought this was something to do with women liberation or whatever. But the more men got involved, the better. And the narrative was, you know, we began to change the narrative about FGM, saying that this is totally unacceptable. And I hope this is going to be the case in stopping child sexual abuse. The next person who's going to shed some light here is Barrister Adedamola Lakpite. He's a fellow of the Forensic Investigators Society of Nigeria, certified family mediator and trauma healing counselor. He's an associate of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators in the United Kingdom and a certified child protection advocate. He's a partner at Aaron and Bell Solicitors based in Nigeria. He is the child protection coordinator for Ogun State and executive director for the Spring Center called SAC. SAC stands for Sexual Assault Referral Center, which is based in Abeokuta, Ogun State, western part of Nigeria. Welcome, Adedamola.
Good evening, Fumi, and hello to everyone. Thanks for having me here tonight.
Thank you. What instigated your interest? What actually made you want to be a child advocate?
All right, thanks for that question. I started work in the Ministry of Justice a while back, and in the course of my work there, I noticed that we had a lot of cases that had to do with abuse of children, but unfortunately, we had very little intervention in the care of the children. Attention was often on prosecuting the perpetrators, getting them to prison, but no attention on the care and upbringing or the welfare of the victims as it is. So from there, I got interested in trying to see how that gap would be filled. And so I resigned my work with the state government, and I went out with campaigns. Like, Omotola said earlier that information is necessary. A lot of people don't have information. They are ignorant of a lot of things. So we went out talking to people, creating awareness. And unfortunately, when we started creating awareness on prevention, people who had experienced it started turning to us. Okay, you teach us about prevention, but now that we've not been able to prevent it, this is what is happening. What do we do? So we started getting calls on what was happening, and our program morphed into a sexual assault referral center. That's how we got involved in this fight.
Okay. So how do you get referrals to the center?
Okay, so people walk into the center because, of course, wherever we go and wherever we go for campaigns, we drop hotlines. We have a central control point for sexual assault referral centers, which is monitored by British Council and EU in Nigeria. So they also send out directories with our phone numbers and our location. So it's everywhere on the social media. You find it on Twitter, on Facebook, and anywhere you get. And also, we work hand in hand with the states. So once reports are made, we get those ones to us. And of course, security agencies, once reports are made to them, they bring the victims to the center too.
Okay. What do you think about the justice system in Nigeria?
Okay, in one word, I would say snail speed. That's the issue. You have it from the time a case is reported to the time justice is served, whether justice for the victim or what you might think is injustice. It could take as long as 4 years, 5 years. So it is slow. That's for the court. From the time the matter is transferred from the police to the court and all that, time goes very slow. But of course, as part of the justice system, the justice sector is also the part of the police. There is a huge problem in that area when it comes to funding. I can tell you for a fact that the police is grossly underfunded. So I'm going to use us as an example. When we get cases reported to us, and we know that we want those cases to move, we have to pay for investigation. We pay for investigation. We pay to the extent that you probably will pay for feeding the perpetrator when the perpetrator is in custody. And also, you have to pay to get the matter arraigned in court. So when you have issues like that, it bastardizes the whole process. Because when a victim and maybe the parents or whoever goes to report in the police station is told that you have to pay 100,000 naira for investigation, and the perpetrator's family is flashing 200,000 naira before you, it's just a matter of calculation. Why not let me just collect this 200,000 naira and go and sit down? Let me just treat, or some of them would throw it at the victims. Let's take care of everything that has to do with this child, and you forget about this whole thing, or else nothing would happen and you will lose out eventually. Eventually, the victims just succumb. And also, another key thing that happens is when you go to the police station and the police are the ones that are starting to judge from there. What were you wearing? Why were you there? You probably enjoyed it too. Why didn't you come out early? Why didn't you scream? You know, all those things, they're still part of the problems that we have in the justice sector. Now, all those things would also push the victim away from getting justice.
So obviously, when you encounter situations like that, your hands are tied. There's nothing else for you to do. You just keep quiet.
Sometimes you fight, but eventually what happens is that even the victims will turn around and come and tell you that, why are you crying more than the bereaved? Look, just don't bother. Just let me be. I can't face this embarrassment continuously. And you know, you as an organization, you become enemies of the police because you still always need them. So you have to play smart. You can't continuously be antagonistic. So sometimes you step it down, sometimes you blow it up, sometimes you get angry, sometimes we get worn out because you are angry and you are helpless.
Right.
You have nowhere else to go, and the people you're supposed to go to are the ones actually complicating the matter.
Meanwhile, the police you are supposed to be working hand in hand with the police as well, isn't it? So that makes it much more difficult to seek or to obtain successful conviction of the perpetrators.
Sometimes it's difficult for you to even blame them because if a police officer tells you that, oh, I have like 15 cases I have to investigate, and I don't have funds to do the investigation, the police officer you're going to meet is already frustrated.
Yeah.
You're bringing another case to the police officer, and you're also frustrated. Two of you would clash, definitely. And the police officer is definitely looking for an opportunity to throw off all the cases off the table. So the next thing is they propose the settlement. It's a family matter. You people go and settle it at home. They just want it off their table. So yes, you have that problem. You would always have that problem in all police stations.
So do you have any involvement with the sex offenders register? So somebody's come to the center to, report. Do you now go to the police and say, look, I want to have the alleged perpetrator's name there, or even after conviction, should I say, after conviction, do you ensure that the name is actually on the register, or how does it work?
Well, in Ogun State, the sex offenders register is domiciled with the judiciary.
Right.
So it's automatic. Once a conviction is handed down, the judiciary simply inserts the perpetrator's name on the sex offenders register. Unfortunately, in Ogun State, as against in Lagos and Ekiti, the register is not published for everyone to see. In Ekiti, if you go online, the picture, they have what they call name and shame. So the picture is blasted everywhere with the details and everything. But in Ogun State, it's still hush hush. We still don't have access to it, and we don't know what is on it. But the judiciary tells us that they have it and they impute names.
Sadly, it would appear that the victims are victimized again, over and over again, especially if nobody seems to be listening to them, or they've tried. I personally know of a case where I was given details of a lady that was abused, and I passed the information on to some police officers in one area of Nigeria, in one state. I shall leave it there. At the end of the day, the lady went there, gave a statement. There were two police officers looking at her. She felt uncomfortable, came back to me, and I told the police officers that she felt uncomfortable with your people around her. And she never went back. And I asked her later on, she said, it's because they came to her and said, next time you're coming, bring something for us. How do you cope with that? People who are supposed to help you are asking you for money. I can't imagine that happening in the UK here, certainly not in the US.
That's part of what I told you.
Yeah.
That's part of what I told you, that As an NGO, our intervention, we always know that if you want things to move, you have to set aside some money to get the things to move, or else it's not going anywhere. And it's not something hidden. It's not as if the police officers are hiding to collect it. If you talk to the superiors and you tell them, no, this is happening and this is not right, they pretend and they tell you that, oh, that's impossible. Why would they do that? But the question you should ask them is, why are your people collecting it? The question you should ask them is, do you provide enough for them to carry out their duties? At that point in time, they tell you, well, it's what we get from the center that we hand down. It's the same thing for other offenses. You call someone that, you call the police that my house is being robbed, and they tell you we don't have fuel in our car, or there is no vehicle attached to our office. Would you come and pick us? It's the same thing. So, but in this situation, you have to pay, and it's nothing hidden. It's not like that, but they know that that is falsehood. You have to pay.
Thank you. Let me quickly ask Kevin. Kevin, would you not say that's perverting the cause of justice if somebody is, if a police officer in the UK here is asking a victim or the victim's family for money?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The only thing I'd like to say is, you see, because sometimes we like to present the West as this, council of perfection where everything works as it's supposed to work. And I shall respond to this anecdotally. A friend told me that he called the police at midnight to say that there was a burglary taking place at his house and an offender had got into his garage. And they said, is he in the house yet? They said, he said, no, not yet. All right, well, we're a bit busy now. We'll be with you in about 3 hours. They put the phone down. So 5 minutes later, he called the police and said, I called earlier to say there was a burglary taking place at my address. Don't bother, don't worry to come in 3 hours because I have killed him. 5 minutes later, the police arrived at his door. Now, it's an anecdote, but it makes you understand that where there are issues of underfunding, people react according to the circumstances of the environment in which they live. So here, it's the police not able to come to an offense which is about to take place, wherein you could lose your life if the person enters your property. But because nothing has happened, they haven't moved. Because this person said, don't worry, I've killed him. Now, an offense has taken place. You've killed somebody. Never mind, he was trying to come into your place. So they came immediately. It shows you they have the facility to do it, but they choose which sections, what they do first. And I think it's largely the same with the situation in Ogun State that Damola was talking about, the situation in Lagos State that Tola was talking about, or in Sierra Leone or Ghana. The circumstances are such that if something is important enough, you will find the police have the resources to deal with it. You will find the police are able to deal with it straight away and can investigate properly. Assume, for example, that the allegation was being made by, let us say, somebody who is of higher standing in society. Would they not jump and carry out that investigation? If they would, it tells us that the problem here is one of economic or social inequality.
Thank you. Damola, can I just bring you back in again? You mentioned the way I could sense the frustration in what you're saying. At the same time, and then with the Ekiti State, I agree with you because we had Dolapo Badmus here when we discussed domestic violence and we focused on rape, and she really pushed for it. So would you say that each state, because now when we say Nigeria is the whole country, but it will appear that each state determines on what to do. They decide on what to do, which is good for their own people. So would you say in Ogun State, they don't think that safeguarding children is a big issue?
I won't say they don't think it is a big issue. I can tell you for a fact that they know it is a big issue. But like I said, it takes knowledge of what to do
Right.
and the will to do it.
Yes.
You understand? So even if you don't know what to do, there are examples that are bound around you. But another thing is willpower. Ogun State is trying. I will give it to them. You understand? We've now in Ogun State we have 2 sexual assault referral centers. In Ogun State, we've passed the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law, which for me is a good one. It's wider. It's initially, before the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law was passed, the laws were inadequate. They didn't even cover emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and all that. But with the passing of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law, it now recognizes all those ones as crimes. Do you understand?
Yes.
So yes, Ogun State understands the things that needs to be done, but prioritizing is an issue. What are the priorities? Another thing that you have would also be funds.
Yes.
Funds, do we have funds available? There are quite a number of other things. They try, but it's that there are just multiple things that are juggling for attention, and maybe that has not moved to the try. The wife of the governor heads the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Management Committee, but there are provisions in that law that funds have to be made available to effect. An example would be that anyone who is experiencing any form of violence, whether sexual or domestic or whichever way, anyone who is experiencing any form of sexual or gender-based violence has a right to free medical attention. But the problem is the funds are not available. So you still go for medical treatment, you have to pay through your nose. And we already said something about going for investigations, you have to pay for it because funding is not available. And that's not even the responsibility of the states. That's the responsibility of the federal. So when you have issues like that, it discourages.
Thank you very much, Damola. Let me just quickly run through. If anybody has questions, please just use the emoticons there to ask the question, or if you want to make a contribution. I'm just quickly going in, through the chat box here, and somebody is mentioning a very high-profile musician who was convicted in America. And the person was saying, how do you read this case? Of course, to me, I think that's just some sort of indication that nobody is above the law in the US. The guy was convicted despite his, global fame. Somebody said here that the justice system should be totally overhauled. I think this is Mojupe. And she also stated here that at times the police have orders from above. Yes, we know that in Africa we have some sort of challenge in that area. There is also, somebody said there isn't any uniformity in safeguarding children, which is true, to be honest. This state will say this one, another state will say something else. There should be some sort of uniformity. Somebody is saying the police are not well equipped, but from what Damola is saying, even though the funds maybe seems to be available, but maybe not accessible, there is a difference. We'll still like to believe that Nigeria will be successful one day in areas such as this, and the same thing with other parts of Africa. So if there are no questions or contributions, I will just quickly talk about the solutions before we wrap up. From a legal perspective here, how do we begin to change the narrative? psychological perspective, even religious. We've talked about that. Even educationally, I think Tola told us a bit about the booklets that she has going around to schools and making them kings and queens. Do you want to touch a bit more on the literature you have there? Is it just in English language or is it in the local dialects? If you want to quickly let us know.
We have them. I have some here in Yoruba language. Just 1 minute, I'll just quickly read it. Okay. Sorry. You can see this. Yeah. It's written because I don't want it to be as if you can see that it's written in Yoruba language.
Okay, right.
Can you see it?
Yes.
And then there's the English version of it.
Right.
Can you see? So we have them in different languages, Pidgin, Hausa, and things like that, so that people can actually understand them. And then, of course, we give them, the flyers to schools, anywhere we happen to be around, even in our buses and everything. And then we just share it around for people to know. And then, can I just quickly say something about the police in Lagos State? Now, part of the innovations we have is that we now have 21 police stations that has the gender desk. The gender desk, what they deal with is just cases of domestic violence, gender-based violence and things like that. And they are specially trained for that. So we encourage people when we go for sensitization that when you go to report at police stations, don't just go to the desk where the man there is dealing with armed robbery cases, dealing with murder charge, and he doesn't have any training at all in issues of domestic violence, or probably by his own culture and training background, he doesn't see it as a big deal. From what we've just been saying, when you get there, say, go home, it's family matter, like they would say. But then if you go to the gender desk,
but how would you know? How would you know whether it's gender desk or?
Yes, at the police stations now, like I said, there are 21 designated police stations now, and it's still going on, depending on funds, because we have to fund them as well. That once you get to the police station, you will see the logo of the gender desk. And then, of course, we have it online. If people go online, they will see all the areas. People will even call in and they will tell the person where the nearest gender desk is to your home. So that has actually assisted in the form of investigation, and the way people, now feel comfortable reporting their cases to the police. Like we always say, we cannot afford them to be raped, So the gender desk is there for them. Then also the court, I agree with Damola that there is quite a lengthy time at times, prosecuting these cases. So Lagos State is now training judges, magistrates, the judiciary, as to, especially the ones in the family court. Remember I said we now have specialized courts for cases like that, so that the cases are fast-tracked. You don't have to mix it up with cases of, and of course, all this protection of safeguarding behind the screen. In fact, children are not even allowed to give evidence in court. They give evidence in the chambers of the judge or the magistrate and things like that. So these are things. So we are not telling the court or the judiciary that they have a duty, responsibility towards survivors of domestic violence, that they must ensure that these cases are done with expeditiously, that they must ensure that the orders that they need to put, at times it might just be an emotional abuse or maybe physical abuse, and then you quickly need to give a restraining order. You don't need to give an adjournment before giving that order. You can do it, there, or even at times so moto without the council applying for it. once you see that, look, there's evidence of violence here, so moto, you can give that order. So those are things that we are now saying that, look, judges themselves, they should be aware that they have responsibility towards survivors. Likewise, counsel as well. Counsel, because we have seen instances where it is even the counsel that is delaying, because probably his brief has not been perfected, or probably he has a headache, or he has not done his own work well, and he's looking for reasons to adjourn the case. So things like this. And then another thing again is that even the counsel has a duty. That was one of the reasons why I had to go and study, get my master's in forensic. Because why? You find that most of the defense counsel, they don't even know much about cases of rape and things, how to formulate their cases during cross-examination. And at the end of the day, they just, make a mess of the case at the end of the day. So even counsel as well have a duty towards survivors. Then of course, the domestic violence team, we have social workers, doctors that give all this psychosocial support, just like Mary said the other time, where we refer these children to. And of course, that Mirabel Center in Lagos State, I'm surprised that I think that is something that Ogun State too has to emulate. When they examine the victims, it is free of charge. It is free. It must be free in any government hospital, whether it's PHC or general hospital, or even you go to any of the SAC, it is free. So, and then one of the things again is that because of this gender desk, they quickly, write a kind of certificate for the victim to take to the hospital, so that the hospital quickly, would do something about it. Likewise, doctors are also being trained as to their duty towards survivors in Lagos State. I just had one last week that I gave, I delivered a paper as to the duties of the doctors as well. That look, it is something, especially when these cases are referred to you, it should take priority, some priority more than anything else as well. So the doctors too, even the pharmacists, and then even we go down to the chemists, because at times the victims, because of their little knowledge of little education and things, once they want to first aid, they just go to chemists, but that chemist, and then they quickly clean up there and get a first aid. So we are not even encouraging the border chemists to say, look, hey, what you're doing is wrong, do it the proper way, and that you must report cases, especially when it is cases concerning children. You must report it to the appropriate authorities so that the case can be investigated appropriately. I think I'll stop at that.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that a lot of training is ongoing compared to the last time that we had people. So things are changing. From a legal perspective, David, do you have any contribution as the solutions in changing the narrative here? Do you think the courts should be tough with the sentencing of sexual abusers?
I think that as far as changing the narrative is concerned, as I said at the outset, by the time these matters come to get to the police or to the courts, as I say, the harm has already been done. And you see, the fact that stern sentences may be applied in itself, I don't think is the answer to the problem. These are, as I said at the outset, these are problems which stem from lust, violence, imbalance in power relationships. And people need to be taught about these things. And I think that Omotola spoke about the work that they're doing with these leaflets in buses and in other places. I think that people need to be taught in schools, because in Ghana, for example, we hear about a lot of teenage pregnancies, and sometimes it's the teachers who are impregnating these young girls. Yeah. And so a message needs to go out to the community. And I would very much hope that one of the groups who have a wide network are the churches.
Mhm.
In Ghana and Nigeria, the churches have large congregations and they can reach a vast number of people. And if these messages are going out from the pulpits as to the harm that this particular type of crime does to the most vulnerable members of our society, then hopefully it will gain some traction.
Mhm.
One thing I know is that an effective and efficient justice system costs a lot of money.
Mm.
And one of the problems that we have in Africa is that we don't have enough money. I was reading an article about a young woman who had been raped in Ghana. Her mother took her to the police. The police were saying that she needed to go and get a medical certificate. And I was saddened to hear that the mother was supposed to pay for this medical certificate herself, rather than that being something that the police or the state would have footed the bill for. This person is saying that they had to pay this bill themselves and they couldn't afford it because it was something in excess of, I think the doctors were asking for something in excess of $50, which was just way outside their reach.
Mm.
Now, if you're having about 40 cases of rape being reported every day, that translates into something like 14,000 plus per annum. It's a huge number of cases that the police are having to deal with. It seems to me as though this thing is a pandemic. It's an evil which is hurting our society.
Mm.
Not to talk about the number of teenage pregnancies and the population explosion, which is an indirect result of all of this. We just don't have, it seems, well, either the structures or the will or the money to tackle this problem. But it's something which is getting out of hand. And I'm not quite sure that the legal system, yes, harsh sentences may be part of the answer, but a lot of perpetrators don't get anywhere near courtrooms. And so harsh sentences on their own are not really going to solve this problem. I would very much hope that our churches and other religious organizations can take these matters up and teach their members, as well as schools and places like that.
Thank you. What about you, Kevin? Another legal aspect of this in changing the narrative?
Well, I agree very much with David that the legal systems that we are facing in our respective countries, I mean, even in the West, cannot solve the problem. If I can take an analogy out of gardening, if you want to grow a tree in the middle of your yard and you want it to grow straight and true, you have to give it care. You have to use proper fertilizer, proper nutrients. You have to prune the tree, make sure that you prop it up from time to time so that it grows straight. And then nature will take care of the rest. So I think it is incumbent on all of us, and it's incumbent on all of our societies to say no more, not in our name. This social imbalance, this economic inequality, the stigma that is attached to all of this, we need to put it to one side. We need to protect those who are most vulnerable, the young, the children, and we need to give them voice. We need for them to be able to know when something is wrong. Often they do, but I grew up in a society, and I know it's now changing in places like Sierra Leone, and I'm sure in Nigeria, where children should be seen. They should be. They should not speak unless they are spoken to. We need to allow children to realize that they can speak. They understand what is wrong, what should not happen, and they should not be punished for saying things. And that way we can nip it in the bud. If we have 40 cases a day coming to court to be reported, that's 40 cases too many. if people stood up right at the start, when it was about to happen, said, no, you can't do it, and shouted, auntie, uncle, look what's happening here. Shame would stop those people from doing it. I mean, I know what Mary says about, pedophilia being an illness, and undoubtedly it is. But clearly, I think what society tells us is there's some people who are attracted, and to them, this is not wrong, and it may not necessarily be an illness. Those people, the people they abuse, we can save them by stopping them from thinking it is all right without their being there. I think that's what I want to say on the subject.
Thank you, Kevin. What about you, Damola? From,
okay, so I will
from an NGO perspective, as well as,
Okay, I will be coming in from another angle.
Okay.
And from our research work, we've noticed something. We now live in a highly sexualized world. And it has become a usual thing in the society. If you put up an issue about someone having been sexually abused, you'll be shocked at the response you get from people. You'll be shocked at how people justify the act. We need to change the attitude of our people. That's part of what we do. We also go all out. We go to the markets, we go to the churches, we go to schools. We have partnerships with the Child Protection Network, which is the largest network of organizations that cater for children. So we go to places and talk to people. Another key thing also is that I believe in Nigeria, there's a need to regulate some of the alcoholic beverages that we have now in Nigeria. A lot of them are actually aphrodisiacs. And of course, they are easily available. So one thing I keep telling people is you don't expect someone to train to box and not eventually find someone to box. Someone who keeps taking aphrodisiacs every time, one day would need to blow out. And who are the easiest people to find? Children. So there has to be a way to curb the availability of these aphrodisiacs. Is key. And another thing also, training. We've talked about training, especially training of police. But the problem I have, we've trained police also in Ogun State. But because we don't have control over the police, we've trained some people, the most solid of them. Let me shock you. One of them was transferred to traffic units from the unit we trained the person, was transferred to traffic unit. There was nothing we didn't say. After going through UN training, this training, that training, they just transferred and you have no control. Or someone who was transferred from Ogun State to a desk work in Abuja after all the trainings. These things are problematic. There has to be some sort of control so that when you train these people, they're still available for you to use. And the key thing also is funding. A lot of things need funding, to the extent that we need to have what you call DNA testing machines around. Those are some things that would make, when Momotola was talking, she said, for evidence of a child, there has to be corroboration. And what corroboration do we often have in Nigeria? We are hoping that there is confessional statement, or we are hoping that the medical report will say, okay, there's a laceration or something. But a lot of times we also know from the definition of rape now that some of them, there might not be any force or violence. Do you understand? So when there is no force or violence, you might not get any medical reports to back it up. So eventually they go scot-free. But if we have things like DNA tests and forensics available also, it comes as what we need to back it up. So I think there are lots of things that still needs to be done, but I think I have to stop here.
Okay. What about the need to regulate the NGOs? Because all of a sudden, before you see somebody says to you, oh, I have an NGO, I have a support group. How do we know they are regulated? Do they even have the appropriate training to handle cases like this and provide support for the victim's family?
Okay, so yes, we have regulations like in Ogun State. all NGOs, especially that have to do with sexual and gender-based violence, must be registered.
Oh, I think we've lost Damola there. Can I bring back
I'm
Mary?
back.
Oh, okay, right. Okay.
Sorry. Okay, so yes, all organizations are registered under the Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development, and they actually regulate what is done. The only problem is, like you said, are they trained actually in handling these things? That's why in Ogun State Child Protection Network, if you're having to handle cases that have to do with children in whatever area it is, you must be registered under the Child Protection Network. And the Child Protection Network ensures training in all those areas. I don't know how it happens in other states, but in Ogun State, Child Protection Network, at least when it comes to children, you must be part of it and train that you must be trained in those areas that you have.
Yeah. I also like the fact that you mentioned that, going to rural areas. So I'm thinking in terms of the market women, the local community leaders. But what about the main aspects? I'm looking from a traditional perspective now, because some people engage in it. I remember asking someone, and he said, well, some people do it for ritual purposes, and that, for power, fame, and fortune. Those type of people need to be reached out to, that it is a crime, whatever the case may be, even if they've been doing it for centuries, that it's no longer acceptable. So I think that's one of the issues faced by some of, Tola talks about the booklet and everything. We're talking about a totally illiterate now. So you need to reach out to people like that as well, to let them know that what they've been doing or what they've been practicing for centuries is totally wrong. There is nothing like, abusing a child for money or sleeping with them, or, So I think this is one of the things that ought to go out. We've talked about going into the schools, the church. And I just want to bring back Mary. What do you see as changing the narrative as well from a psychological point of view? I don't know whether Mary is still with us.
I am right here.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, in terms of what exactly, which part?
We're talking about the solutions now. We've talked about the legal aspect, religious, then counseling. Do you think that there should be prompt counseling of victims of sexual abuse? But then again, when you say therapy is expensive and everything, are we not supposed to be working closely with the police?
These are all government sector services. If you're going to have centers, hospitals, or places where victims could go, NGOs funded by the government, again, the public is made aware of where they can go, then yes, availability is there. In the Western world, you have schools that have counselors in schools. You have in the corporate world, they have counselors in the corporate world. Almost every organization abroad, private or public, has counselors, in-house counselors, or they can refer to a paid entity where they can go and seek for help. Hospitals have hotlines. It's everywhere. It's all over the place abroad. We don't have the funding here. Again, we're back to money. We don't have the fundings here. Awareness, we don't have. So like one of the commenters said, that we need to start within ourselves to help ourselves. And David, I think, said it, that the churches in Africa and I think the religious institutions, I would say the religious institutions, because you have the Islams, you have different denominations, and we are so religious in Africa that almost everyone, the person selling something on the streets and the lady that is a minister, we all go to church. We all meet at the same place. So the best place, like David said, really is we need to be very active in our educational organizations, in the in the corporate world, in the churches, religious institutions, to raise awareness first. It is, like you were saying, for me, it is against the law.
Yeah.
You cannot do it. So if impending what's it called, victims who hear this and they know it's against the law, they're old enough, or they know, oh, I heard something, it's against, you can't touch me, you can't speak out loud and things like that. So that would come into the preventive ways of what else can you do individually to help ourselves, aside from relying on the government or NGOs and things like that.
And I think we also need to know that charity begins at home. We should be very cautious of the boy child and girl child. Somebody's posted here that we need to watch out for the telltale signs as well. When children are withdrawn, they're uncomfortable, especially in the presence of their perpetrators, loss of focus, they cry easily, unlike before, the signs of fear, amongst others. So, and also to, just to pay little attention, I think, was it Kevin who said it earlier, that, in those days, it was like children are not to be heard, but these days, they speak up, they speak out. So to listen to them when they have something to tell us, no matter how bad it may sound.
Let me add, for me, one more thing to this before I go out. You can't necessarily generalize the tell signs. It's very individualistic. Please know that the severity of the assault will determine behaviors.
Right.
One, culture will impact behavior. Two, you have the child's, the way the child, sorry, I had a call coming in. The way the child, your child best, or whoever the caregiver is, knows the behavior or the emotional behavior or the physical signs of what your child behaves generally. So I can't not say that the way you can have generalized, or it could be. At the end of the day, you need to look out for your child. If the child doesn't want to go to a particular family member's house for no reason prior, and all of a sudden, for example, your 8-year-old doesn't want to go to Auntie Fumi's house, for example, don't just brush it. Okay, you're not going, fine, we're going without. Find out why the child doesn't want to go to Auntie Fumi's house. If the child doesn't want to go to school anymore, it doesn't have to be education. It could be somebody else doing something else in school. Talk, what is happening? Have that open dialogue where the child will be able to speak up. So we need to be very attentive, bring our ears to the ground to make sure that we listen and we ask questions at home. Because if we don't get these kids to talk, it won't get to the lawyers, it won't get to the police, it won't get anywhere. It stays at home. So the home is the forefront, in first place where a parent or a caregiver would say, oh, this child is a bit withdrawn, or this child is too loud, or why are you so aggressive all of a sudden, or why, so you see out of character behaviors in emotion or physically. If it's a baby, if it's a child, you're changing diapers, or the child is going to the toilet, it's crying for no reason, or all of a sudden the child is scared to go to bed alone, when before it could go to sleep without any issue. So don't just, there are no nightmares, there is no must. We need to, it's still part of education, but these are little signs that you pick up. So don't brush away little things like, I don't want to go to school today, or I don't feel like going to church because some uncle in church is touching me in Sunday school, or I don't want to have the lesson teacher. Oh, that's another big one we have in Africa. Lesson teachers coming to your homes. You don't want to leave these girls or boys with lesson teachers alone because it's a teacher, he's fine, she's fine. They're in your home, it's a comfort zone. The child is in their comfort zone, so listen, pay attention. I don't like this teacher. Why? Forget education. Why don't you like the teacher? So we need to be a bit more inquisitive, more asking, and more attention given to basic. Kids use different vocabulary, very important. Let's be very sensitive towards the words and the vocabulary they use. The younger they are, the more surface words they're going to use. It's for you to discern what they could be saying. The older they are, they're going to be more specific. If it's a younger child and they have all of a sudden vaginal, or I can't say certain words, pain, abdominal pains, be attentive. Don't say going to the doctor takes too long. Traffic is far. I'm going to sit at the doctor's for 3 hours. It's going to go, the pain's going to go, don't worry. Drink more water. These are the normal casual excuses we give at home to brush away things, but these kids don't know any better in terms of vocabulary, expressing themselves, how to tell you something is wrong with themselves or somebody is doing something to them. So just so that I'll add that to the tell signs in the layman everyday life that we can pick on.
And then it could be the domestic stuff as well, being scared of the driver. The same thing with the house help, whether it's a male or a female. And then again, if it's the dad, the young girl doesn't want to be around the dad. Usually we just think about the dad, but then there've been cases with mother as well, towards their little boys. So we just have to be very mindful of this. Let's quickly run through this myth or fact. So maybe what I'll do is, whilst I'm still talking to you, Mary, I'll just quickly give you this question. So is, true or false? An abuser is only a man. True or false?
False, obviously.
An abuser is someone you do not know.
False.
A victim is always a female.
False.
Only females can be children's advocate.
I think half the people here are men at this point.
A minor is I wanted to put age to this, so I'm going to take that out because it depends on the area. A parent can never be a sexual abuser.
Wrong.
The rule of law must be obeyed, irrespective of the status.
Should. I will use the word should be, not must, but should be.
Well, okay, fair enough. Counseling is a form of therapy to deal with past sexual abuse.
Definitely.
Okay, let me take Tola on this one. A cleric, whether it's a pastor or an Islamic scholar or white garment shepherd or traditional chief, can never sexually abuse a minor.
False.
If sexual assault or abuse or rape takes place in a worship center, it's better just to pray and, just to forgive the accused person.
Capital false.
The police should conduct thorough investigation without bias.
True.
Okay. Only a father can sexually abuse a child.
False.
Okay. A teacher cannot sexually abuse any child.
False.
Okay, let me take Damola on this one. Spiritual problem can never be accepted as evidence in a court of law.
True.
Okay, no, say for example, I said it was the devil that caused it. Could it be accepted in the court of law?
It's not accepted.
Okay, because we see a lot of this thing on social media is the devil, any inappropriate touching by an adult, even a close relative, is unacceptable.
True.
Okay. Law of entrapment cannot be accepted in a competent court without prior knowledge of place. Because we've seen some people resorting to self-help because they just got frustrated.
It's not allowed.
It's not allowed. Maybe I'm going to throw it back to David. David, law of entrapment. It cannot be accepted in a competent court without prior knowledge of the police.
Well, entrapment actually, in English law, entrapment is a defense. When it is established that the agent provocateur originated the idea of the crime and induced the accused to engage in it.
Mm-hmm.
So entrapment can be a defense. I mean, obviously, depending on the circumstances.
Exactly. That's where I'm going. And that was the reason why I asked you the question. Say, what if I was the one that did the whole setup and then I tendered it in court as evidence? I never told the police. I resorted to self-help because I got frustrated.
Well, when you say you resorted to self-help because you got frustrated, can you
Yeah, I just
expand
got frustrated. I knew that, this was something that had been going on. Nobody's listening to me. Without telling the police, I just, set my traps, did my own recording, my own little mini CCTV using my phone. And then I said, this is just to as proof.
if you set up a camera in your house, that isn't entrapment. If you set up some hidden camera somewhere,
yeah,
and that camera records someone sexually assaulting a child, then that isn't entrapment. And entrapment relates to something else, where somebody is an agent provocateur, incites somebody to commit a crime. So I think there's a slight difference there, which one needs to have in mind.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it back again to Kevin. Kevin, let me create another scenario. I'm quite aware that this is a perpetrator who's been doing it for years. And then I used my phone to set up the alleged perpetrator. And that same child has been abused severally. Would that law of entrapment come into play in a competent court?
Again, I'll give you the same answer as David gave you. If what you created was simply you didn't facilitate the offense, because you see, when you use the word entrapment, there's a suggestion there's a facilitation of an offense. Now, the court will have to consider, if an offense took place on this occasion, would it have occurred but for your facilitation of it? You see? So if you facilitated it or enabled it, it may be that the difficulties that the court would have is in considering whether you haven't actually created what we call in normal parlance a setup. You set somebody up in order to catch them, and your motives may be myriad. On the other hand, if you have just simply put a camera there are other legal problems in relation to that. I'm not saying that a competent court cannot look at that evidence, because it can. It'll have to weigh up the odds. But there are general issues with the use of photographic evidence, I think particularly in our courts in Africa, whereby if you have not obtained the consent of persons who are going to be depicted on the camera, then the courts may find it difficult to accept it. But maybe we should be saying, in these particular circumstances, where the evidence is clear, it outweighs that particular protection that is given to individuals as to their privacy.
Okay, right. The next statement is the safety and mental well-being of the minor are paramount.
True.
Absolutely true.
Okay. Parents and guardians of children must ensure that they are protected at all times.
True.
No one is above the law in a case which involves sexual abuse of a minor or any
True.
case at all. Okay. Schools must take prompt action where a minor is being abused by their parents. Let me read that again. Schools, say for example, it's been reported in school that a minor is being abused by their parents.
True.
Okay, let me flow back to David now for the last set of statements.
Sorry, I just answered the last set. It was David who was answering the questions.
Okay, no problem, because I gave David just one or two. That's why I just wanted him to go through one or two. Everyone should be given fair justice.
True.
Okay.
You're getting both answers now.
You can still lead a normal life after being sexually abused. I don't know about this. Yes or no?
I think that's a tough one, but it's highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. If you've been significantly abused, there are people who are strong enough in character to be able to live a normal life. And I think that's with counseling, with so many forms of assistance, maybe. But I think it's a significant, if you are abused as a man, it's going to have a significant impact on your life.
No excuse whatsoever can justify sexual abuse of a minor, even he or she looks older or dresses in a provocative manner.
True.
Okay. Right. Thank you so much for that.
Can I just
Yes.
interrupt and just answer a question which you didn't ask me?
Oh, sorry. Now, let me
It's
ask
the
you-
question. It's the
Okay.
question about the devil telling you to do something.
Yes.
My answer to that question would be this. If you're going to go to court and rely on the devil telling you to do something,
Right.
if I was sitting as the judge, I would
Your
ask
profession.
you to present the devil as your witness.
As your witness.
Well, this is how we begin to change the narrative to let people know that, especially people who are so hung up about religion. I told you about a case which involves a pastor. It's really a sad one because, well, I don't know the pastor personally, but I just thought to myself, what's this guy going to say? And like I knew, he just said he was the devil. So how is the devil going to, like you said, are they going to bring the devil to court and
Well, yes.
suspend the
Bring
devil?
it.
Huh. So, okay, maybe whilst you're on, let me just give you the last one then. Trained counselors or social workers should be present when a minor is being interrogated. And if they are deemed fit and appropriate for the interview. How is that handled in the UK courts here?
Well, in the UK courts, depending on the age of the minor and depending whether they have learning difficulties, the court or the court or the prosecution may require the assistance of an intermediary who will come and give some guidance as to how the child should be questioned, matters of that nature. And actually, there's a procedure, Section 28 procedure, whereby the cross-examination of vulnerable witnesses actually takes place before the trial. It's recorded before the trial and then played at the trial. And so child and other vulnerable witnesses are treated with, let me say, with a great deal of care to make sure that they're not overwhelmed by the process.
Could you just give a final message, just one short sentence on the subject matter? Each member of the panel, just one sentence. Okay, let me go with Tola. Just a short sentence, a final message on the subject matter, tackling sexual abuse of minors. Okay, let me go with Mary.
Okay, yes, my the take home for everybody is that all hands must be on deck. We are all stakeholders in this matter, whether you're a parent, you're a caregiver, you are a law enforcement officer, or you're in the judiciary, or you're even a traditional ruler, or a faith-based ruler, or whatever in the mosque or in the church. We all have a stake. These children are our future, and we really need to take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary?
That pedophilias have mental illnesses. They are not psychologically or in the normal way, they don't function normally. So to say that they do it intentional, you could debate that because they are struggling with their mental illness. If it was a depression, you would say, okay, depression, let's give medications. And it's fine because the person physically has symptoms that you can help with. So let's just remember that there are several mental illnesses that don't give outward signs. So we as a whole need to be aware that human beings walking about could have a host of issues going on, whether they look normal in suits or she's pretty wearing pretty dress and she looks normal. let's just always be aware that not everyone in the psychiatric ward has mental illness. People walking on the streets could have issues as well, and they're functioning very okay.
Thank you. David?
I would say that children, like the rest of us, have rights, and those rights must be respected. They are our future, and in helping them grow up, we must train them to do the right thing. And taking advantage of them sexually is a complete no-no.
Thank you. Damola?
Okay, so like the theme of this year's 16 Days of Activism says, unite. Just like we have come tonight to unite to speak against sexual and gender-based violence, especially the rape of minors, we need to unite as a people, as government, as individuals, as NGOs. We need to unite and speak with one voice against this pandemic that is eating us up gradually. We need to unite. That's my final word.
Thank you. Last but not the least, Kevin?
We have a responsibility to support and strengthen the confidence and the ability of our most vulnerable members of society to speak out. And we must, once they speak out, act as soon as possible, because prevention is better than cure. And we must hold our future as carefully as we will hold that which is most precious to each and every one of us.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the panel, Kevin, Tola, Damola, David, and Mary, and everyone who's actually joined us, whether on Zoom or YouTube. This is the Renewing the African Mindset discussion program. I hope everybody has enjoyed this discussion, and let's begin to talk more and more about it. Everybody keeps on creating the awareness. Do not let us, just don't let us stop about this, because the children are our future. And I'd like to say on this note, good evening. Goodbye.